to the end. And obviously put in your questions in chat throughout. And in case any of our alumni look at those, they can address them then and there, or whenever we take a pause. And don't worry, in case they fail to address it, that is my job to make sure that I bring that up and force them to address it. So don't worry about that. And I'm sure they'll do their best to address your queries. So thank you all once again for joining today's call. I'm really excited to introduce our alumni to you, but as you guys had put in the feedback form for us that you don't want to hear much from us and more from the alumni, I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves to you guys. So yeah, starting with any one of you guys, whoever likes, please, you can go ahead. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What school did you go to? Where are you currently at? What influenced you to study or take up the course that you currently are studying? And yeah, what the process was for you to get into that university. So yeah, maybe we could start with Parth.
All right, perfect. Hi there, guys. My name's Parth. I'm a current freshman at Brown University. For high school, I went to the Sri Ram School in Delhi. I studied in the International Baccalaureate program, and sort of what influenced me to pursue my education outside of India was more like of a combination of just me growing up and like doing a lot of my growing up outside of India. So sort of for me, at least personally, that was a factor that weighed in heavily on like wanting to go outside. But I'm currently majoring in applied math economics with a dual concentration in most probably philosophy. So yeah, that's what I'm currently majoring in. I ended up choosing Brown and then like the specific program here, mainly because of they have this thing called the open curriculum, which basically allows you to like study a huge wide range of fields, like whatever field you're interested in, and then still graduate with the major that you want. So for me, that was a huge advantage in terms of like exploring my fields of interest before like locking into like whatever I actually want to choose. But yeah, and a fun fact about me, I really enjoy playing golf and I'm a diehard John Mayer fan. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Parth. And I'm sure you must be the only real golf enthusiast on this meeting. Maybe I'm saying that too soon. There's someone else who really enjoys that sport, but thank you so much for sharing that. So, Ayushi, do you want to go next?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Ayushi, and I've moved around a lot for my education, but for the last few years, I was in Chennai. So I did like a majority of my education studying there. I was at the school called PSBB for a majority of it from 6th to 10th. Then I shifted to another school, both CBSE board, to study humanities because PSBB didn't offer that. And I had decided pretty early on, like right now I'm studying law and I'm at my first year in NUJS Kolkata, which is the National University for Juridical Sciences. So I decided to study law, I think pretty early on, like probably in sixth, seventh grade itself. There were like a lot of factors for it. There was like an immediate relative who was studying law, so I could see that the subjects that they are doing seemed interesting to me right back then as well. So, and I'd like knowing the fact that something I would do would have like impact in real world. That was always like a consideration that I had, and just reading the written law and exploring the various areas is something that I now get to do like at college because that like I feel like the representation that we have earlier on is just okay, criminal law exists, civil law exists, but beyond that, like there are so many niches that actually happen. So I recently got to read up on like investment arbitration, which sounded really boring to me initially, but was something that I actually ended up enjoying a lot. So, what area of specialization I would actually end up doing is not yet. I don't really know yet. Like probably towards third year, I'd find that out. But yeah, very excited to be here otherwise.
Thank you so much, Ayushi. And I'm sure that speaks to a number of the students on the call who all have a similar passion for law. And many of that could be inspired by debating as well, as my hope. So, yeah, I'm sure that they'll get whatever guidance they need from you over the course of the next hour. Sanjna, if you'd like to go next. Hold on, let me ask you to unmute.
Thank you. I don't know where that button went. But hi everyone, I'm Sanjna. I grew up in Bangalore and went to two ISE schools in Bangalore. I went to Shishipraha and then I went to Malayadati for 11th and 12th. And I was a science stream student, so I did PCMB, Physics, Chem, Math, Bio. I studied at Ashoka University in Sonipat in Haryana, and I just graduated from there in May. I spent 4 years there. And I majored in biology and did a concentration in sociology and anthropology. I actually wasn't decided on what I wanted to do when I entered college. I was interested in a bunch of things, ranging from political science to biology. And the reason I chose Ashoka is because it is a liberal arts college. So similar to what Parth mentioned, there's you have time to be able to choose what you want to major in, and there's a core curriculum of foundation courses that every student has to take regardless of their major. So it really gives you the ability to explore different fields before committing to one. And Ashoka was also a really good college for the subjects that I was looking at. So it's got an excellent biology department, and at the time it had a really good political science department as well. The reason I chose to stay in India as opposed to going abroad, which is a question I get pretty often, is just because the simple factor of one, affordability. Studying in India is often a lot cheaper, and in comparison to studying abroad, it's a lot less hassle. And I also am part of that unfortunate batch that graduated high school in 2020. So the pandemic meant that going abroad was significantly harder. Um, I graduated from Ashoka in May, and I will be heading to the University of Oxford to start my master's in about a week or so. And I'll be doing my master's in immunology. So it's a specialized uh, area of the biological sciences and the medical sciences. Um, yeah, I think I've covered most of it. Um,
Yeah, thank you so
yeah.
much. It's a bit poetic that someone who graduated during the pandemic is studying immunology that could potentially prevent a pandemic. So thank you so much, Sanjana, for that. Zaina, would you like to share about yourself, please?
Hi everyone, I'm Zaina. I am from Amritsar. I studied in Amritsar for high school, so I went in Vickers International School. As for like the curriculums, I've had a lot of experience with three different curriculums. I studied the CBSE curriculum in grades 9th and 10th, and I did the Cambridge A levels in 11th and 12th. But I also did APs throughout my time in high school. So if you have any questions about any of the three curriculums, more than happy to answer. Um, I don't think I mentioned what college I'm at. I am a freshman, a first year student at Harvard. I am planning on concentrating in government, and I am also planning on being on the pre-med track. So just so you know, Harvard calls majors concentrations, and we call minors secondaries. So yeah, different terminology. What else was there? Okay, why I chose this particular college. I think, especially for what I wanted to study. So I wanted to get the best of both worlds. I wanted to do a lot of social studies, but I also wanted to do a lot of STEM. And Harvard just happens to have this excellent mix of both. The government department at Harvard is one of the best in the world. We have some, like, you probably come across some really good books by faculty at Harvard. One of the professors whose classes I'm taking this semester, Stephen Levitsky, has been on The Daily Show. He's written a New York Times best-selling book that I am reading in his class, How Democracies Die. You may or may not have heard of it. And I think even when it comes to STEM, again, like there's so much that Harvard offers. I'm in a peer mentoring program already for lab research and just so much more that I could go on about. But I think, yeah, I think the last thing was why I chose to study in the US, which I think is sort of also the answer to why I chose this college, is I really wanted a liberal arts education. India wouldn't have allowed me to do that. In India, I would have either had to pick going into like the social studies or doing medicine, and I didn't want to make that decision just yet. Studying in the US just allows me to use these 4 years in college to make up my mind before finally choosing. So yeah, I think that's it. Excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Zaina. That was really thorough. I really appreciate that. And yeah, Hans.
Hello, I'm Hans. I live in Delhi. So I went to school in Delhi. I went to DPS International in Saket. And I did my schooling in Cambridge IGCSE and then Cambridge A levels. I am going to the University of Oxford for an undergraduate degree in history and politics soon because Oxford is, for some reason, really weird and only opens in like October, which is why like Sanjana and I are still here, unlike everyone else who is already at college. but whatever. The reason why I ended up wanting to go to Oxford, so the reason why I wanted to end up studying history and politics is a very long-winded conversation of its own, but just generally, I've always been really interested both in history and like stories of people and societies in the past and how they shape present-day policies and current world issues. So that's why I ended up studying that. As for why Oxford, just generally speaking, because like the history and politics department at Oxford is really, really, really good. And just interacting with like research from academics from that university and talking to people, etc., sort of made me just really, really, really like the sort of curriculum because I sort of already knew quite strongly what I wanted to do. And so I knew that I wanted to study history and politics, but at the same time, Oxford and the UK system gives you a degree of more flexibility over what specific topics within the broader subject you want to study, particularly in your second and third years of college. And so that combination, I think, fit really well with me. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Hans. And I just want to take a second and speak directly to all the participants here. That might have been super intimidating to listen to because all of these guys are really high achieving for where they're currently at. And just to let you know a secret, I've been watching them throughout their journey. And I remember the days when they were here on an ISDS orientation on the other side, listening to other alumni. So please don't think that any of this, these are things that you can't achieve and you can't really get to. So don't allow yourself to be intimidated by any of this. This is definitely something that you should aspire for. And the whole process of this meeting today is to let you know what are the clear steps that you can action on to get to a goal like this. So I'm really excited to break that down with you guys, along with the help of the 5 alumni on the call. So thank you so much, guys, for sharing that information. I just want to go through some specifics now and quickly pick your heads for some questions. I guess the first question, that's a very common question that's asked from many students is, and obviously this is a very sort of tricky question to understand when you're doing your own research, is what is the general process to get an admit in a college that you've gotten to? And obviously you guys are in different places. So I just want to hear from you guys, what is the general process to get an admit in a college like yours? And if it's a college, if someone else describes an admit process that's very similar to yours, you can just point that out. But generally speaking, if we go through the list and go through what the general processes are. So yeah, maybe we can start in the same order, Parth. What was your process to get your admission?
Sure. So I think like the baseline for any college, and like this doesn't matter where you're applying for, is a strong foundation of like academics. So you need to be good at what you want to study, and you also need to just show to the college, first of all, that you'd be able to like survive in their environment, because college, you do start learning a lot of information very quickly. So your academics are a good way to tell the college that, you know, not that you're necessarily very smart or very intelligent, but just more so of a factor that you'd rather fit in and that you'd be able to keep up with the academics of that specific college. So that's the first thing. Then the second thing, and this is, I think most people who are considering to study abroad would probably know about this, but there's extracurriculars. So this means that you have to do things that are passionate to you, and you have to find like other interests outside of academics that you really enjoy doing, and you have to show how you're passionate about it. It doesn't mean that you have to like always be number one in the world for everything. It just means you have to show to the college that whatever you do, you're very passionate about what you do, and that you've put a lot of time and effort into perfecting that craft or like improving that craft. And if you show that to the college, it shows that you're dedicated towards something, you have passion, you have interest. And in general, then you write essays also talking about those experiences, and et cetera, et cetera. Along with a bunch of test scores, you apply to, well, my university, and then depending on, and then you usually get your result of whether you're in or not. But like, yeah, that's like sort of the bare bone structure of how it works.
Perfect. That makes sense. Just to summarize, that is putting together a profile that suggests that you're able to cope with their academic workload that often involves showing your academic prowess. Second is having a strong extracurricular background to show what your interests are. Third is representing those interests in an essay or any sort of written format. And then fourth, just putting together the application, if that's the summary of this. Thank you so much, Parth. Yeah, Ayushi, I know your process is completely different. So if you just want to walk us through.
Yeah, so unlike applying to college externally, the way you get through like these national law universities in India is via this entrance exam called CLAT, which is the Common Law Admission Test. There are also private universities. Some of the biggest ones are Symbiosis and Jindal. Jindal has a separate exam, which is LSAT India, very similar to LSAT that happens in US, etc. And then Symbiosis has another exam called SLAT. So this entire process is very similar to JEE NEET. Like the only thing that will matter for you to get into these colleges is your rank, and these then become like it's majorly a competition as to how the others are doing as well, because a lot of people on the same score could then have different ranks as well. And the tiebreaker becomes this section which is called legal reasoning, at least in CLAT. So you out of I think 25, 28 NLUs, I'm not exactly sure how many, you get to rank them based on your preferences. Currently, I think National Law, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Kolkata, Jodhpur, and Gujarat are in that order, which is what usually people prefer. And then there is NLU Delhi, which has a separate entrance exam called ALIT. So essentially, the subjects that they have sort of are pretty similar, but these are all different exams you'll have to take up, get a good rank. And when I mean a good rank is in the general category, you have to be under 500 or under like 550 ranks to get the first five colleges. And for NLU Delhi, it's an even smaller number. I think the general category seats are around 50. So it might seem a little bit competitive, but then there are obviously some more quotas involved to it. But yeah, in general, the subjects that they test are legal reasoning, English, logical reasoning, quantitative aptitude, and GK. Quantitative aptitude is when math comes in. It's not that hard for CLAD. It's just your basic math till 10 standard. And other than that, English and logical reasoning in this recent pattern has become very, very similar. They just test your general comprehension skills, just how you apply logic. So, unlike the other process that we've heard so far, debating or your external activities might not help you very explicitly, but definitely in your preparation process, there's an implicit help that comes from all the other external things that you've done. So, if you have a habit of like arguing well, then you probably have a grasp of like logical reasoning pretty quickly, because one thing that they ask you questions based on are strengthening and weakening arguments, things like that will explicitly be the question. So you can figure it out pretty easily. Oh, this is the core of this argument. This is why it would strengthen it or weaken it, is something that you've learned from debating. And other than that, if you are doing something very research heavy, which means you have a decent enough grasp at like reading and your speed is good enough, it would probably help you with the extensive reading that you need to do throughout this exam. It's a 2 hour exam with around 17 to 18 passages, which are all more than 100 words long. So if you need to really be quick at reading and grasping and understanding. But yeah, that's what the process majorly looks like. Maybe we could go into details of it a bit later.
Thank you so much, Ayushi. That was actually quite detailed and thorough. So just to summarize, to get into a law school in India, you need to write a CLAT exam if you're looking at the government universities, and there are private universities with private exams. And in CLAT, there are about 4 subjects that are tested that you highlighted, out of which there's no explicit implication of debating because it's all academic work. But while working on this stuff, there is definitely a benefit to being able to think like a debater does because of the logical implications of how to crack those questions. So that was super helpful. And I think I summarized what you just said. Moving to Sanjana, just curious to know what was the process to get into college like Ashoka?
So Ashoka is a bit different from other Indian colleges. So usually, if you were applying to an Indian college for a BSc, if you're applying to a research-based college like an IISc or IISER, they have their own admissions test, or some of them will also take your JEE and NEET scores. When I was applying to college, there was this test called the KVPY that's been replaced by the JEE and the NEET now. And if you're applying to like a non-research focused BSc or BA college like DU, that's based on your board marks. The advantage of Ashoka and colleges like Ashoka, like Azim Premji University, which are like liberal arts colleges in India, is that they will give you an admission before your board scores. So you don't need to wait to write your board exams, and it doesn't matter really how well you do on your board exams, because they'll give you, if you apply early enough, they'll give you the offer of admission before that. So getting into Ashoka, they have their own entrance test. So I actually got it waived my year because if you had an SAT score, you wouldn't have to write it, but now it's compulsory. So the process is just sort of a mix of a general Indian entrance exam and then a more relaxed SAT style exam. So it's got critical thinking questions, logical reasoning, basic reading comprehension questions, all designed to test how you think and what your thought process is rather than what you already know. And it's the same test for everyone across disciplines. So obviously there's no discipline specific knowledge. The second thing that's there that even I had to do was this timed essay thing that you have to write. And so they give you like a prompt, and it's usually some kind of argumentative essay, and then you have a time limit, and then you have to type this essay out into their special like test portal. So that's there. And then also you have an application that's more similar to a US style college than an Indian style college. So you have an essay that you have to write, and then you upload your CV and talk about all of your extracurriculars, and then you also send in your grades and your mark sheets, and you need a letter of recommendation. Where it differs from US style colleges, though, is that they don't necessarily expect they sort of use the extracurriculars and all of the other non-academic factors to assess your application in its context, rather than just they look for a well-rounded candidate, but they kind of look at it to make sure whether you have the critical thinking skills and the sort of fit for the liberal arts environment as opposed to a more traditional rigid Indian college where you go in with your major decided. So that I would say is a big difference compared to other Indian colleges and also slightly different from the American system. And they also give you slightly more guidance while writing the essay. They will release a guide. They will have webinars as to how to write the essay, what do they expect, what do they look for as admissions officers. And then after all of this, you have an interview that's in person where they ask you pretty much whatever they want. It's two people. You can get quizzed on stuff related to your potential major that you would have written on your application, or just generalized stuff in general. And this is where being a debater was really useful because they literally gave me a topic and asked me to start debating. And then I got a lot of questions about debating during my interview as well. So that's the broad process for Ashoka.
Thank you so much. That was very, very insightful, Sanjana. That's super helpful, I think, to some of the listeners on the call. Finally, Zaina, I know Parth kind of described a process for Brown. Just want to check if Harvard is significantly different.
I think Parth pretty much covered most of what you need to know for US applications. That's primarily because US applications, regardless of the college to which you're applying, are very similar. I will add maybe just a couple of more things. One is I think the interview is often an important component of the application. Certain colleges do not offer interviews. Harvard in particular does offer an interview. Not everybody gets an interview. So it is a component that when you're applying, you may be offered, but you may not have an interview either. But it is a very good opportunity for the college to get to know you as a person, and to actually put a face to the words that they've seen on that written application. And it is also a great opportunity for you to get to know the college. And that's because I think Sanjana mentioned this, the idea of the fit. I think when you're applying to college, that's what you should be thinking of the most, whether the college to which you're applying or which you want to get in is necessarily a good fit for you. And I think the interview is a really good way of getting to know whether the values of the college to which you're applying, the kinds of opportunities they have, the kind of student body they want to build, whether that aligns with you. Interviews are held either by alumni. A lot of the colleges to which I was accepted in the US, I had alumni interviews for. However, for Harvard, I had an admission officer interview. So there is that possibility as well. The second thing I'd add is you also have the recommendations. So in addition to everything that you were saying about yourself, you will have letters of recommendation sent in by your teachers, by a counselor in school, by if you want external recommenders who will attest to the wonderful work you're doing. And I think just to sort of bring it together. So basically the platform through which you're doing all of this. So in the US, you have what's called the Common App, which is this way of sending the same application to all of the colleges to which you're applying. And so everything that we've talked about, Parth talked about your extracurriculars, your academics. So you sort of put that all together in this one application. And so the Common App is interesting in the way in which it asks you to present things. So when it comes to your extracurriculars and activities, you will have a section that's for your activities. and you get to list up to 10 of them, but you have only about 150 characters to describe them, which can be very tricky. But it's also a great way of condensing everything that you've done over the course of 4 years, condensing it to only what really matters and is important. So it's an interesting format that way. And I think the last thing I just say is, so in addition to the Common App, a lot of colleges have supplemental questions, which is to say, if you are applying soon, or if you're considering applying, you might be aware that you have this one big essay that everybody talks about, the personal essay or the personal statement. But in addition to that, you also have additional questions that the college to which you're applying poses to you. So in Harvard's case, I had 5 questions I needed to answer, 200 words each, sort of like shorter essays. And this varies from college to college, the kinds of questions you're asked. Yale, for instance, has what they call, I think, short takes. It's, I think, answers in 50 words or less. I might be mixing it with another college. But yes, there's generally a lot of variety in the kinds of essays you'll be writing. And I think that's about it.
Thank you so much. That was again very insightful. Finally, Hans, is there anything else to add, or what, is there any different process?
Yeah, so the UK process is actually quite different from the US process in several ways. The way in which you apply to college in the UK is just, so like what Zaina was saying, for the US, you have the platform that's the Common App. For the UK, you have this thing called the UCAS, which is a pretty similar online platform where you can select up to 5 colleges or programs that you want to apply for. And unlike the US, however, the UK basically really only wants one essay. So unlike for US colleges where each individual college has several essays you want to write, in addition to your general Common App essay, for the UCAS, you just have this one thing that's called a personal statement. So one essay that you have to write. And it's really, really simple. It's basically just, you need to tell them, one, why it is that you are interested in the program that you're applying for, and 2, why you're going to be competent at the program that you're applying for. So yes, extracurriculars can be a good way to show that you are interested in a certain subject or are good at doing it. But extracurriculars for their own sake, or like things like that, UK colleges really don't care about. They basically just want to know that you're going to be nerdy, basically. So that's the personal statement. Then they get your grades, letters of recommendation, etc. And that's all throughout. Typically, for most US colleges, this is where the process ends. But because Oxford and Cambridge are weird, you need to jump through additional hoops. So depending on what degree you're applying for, you might have to give an entrance examination that will be unique based on what subject you're applying for. So I applied to Oxford for history and politics. I had to give this test called the HAT, or the history admissions test. And it was a really weird exam. Like, we basically got a document about succession law in medieval Ireland. And the question was, you have 1 hour, analyze the source, and so on and so on. So quirky things like that. And then after that, after you've written your personal statement and you've given your entrance exam, Oxford will probably ask you for a piece of written work. So an academic essay you have written in your subject. So I just submitted them an essay that I wrote in history class that was graded. Once all of that is done, they will then select a certain number of candidates for interview. So they will reject a bunch of candidates after the entrance exam and reading your essays and whatnot. About 1/3 of candidates go for interview for Oxford. For Cambridge, I think this is a little higher, but yeah. The way the interview worked for me was I had 2 interviews, one with the history tutors, one with the politics tutors, and both were like really, really interesting. And this is where like debate actually did help a lot, particularly if you're applying to like a more humanities-based subject in the UK and you have to give an interview. It helps to be able to think logically, because oftentimes the way in which interview questions are designed is they're designed to like test how you think and catch you off guard and things like that. So yeah, and then after interview, you wait a while and then you learn whether or not you got it or you didn't. So yeah, that was my process basically.
Thank you so much, Hans. Just handing back to Zaina.
I was just going to really quickly jump in, just sort of in line with what Hans said, because I also applied to the UK. And I think one thing I'd say is, so you can either apply to Oxford or Cambridge. You cannot apply to both of those in the UK. I applied to Cambridge, and the process can be slightly different depending on which of these 2 you're applying to. So it also entirely depends on the course of which you're looking for. So in particular, I applied for HSPS at Cambridge. That did not require an admissions test in my case, but I again obviously had the interview that Cambridge does, and similar to what Hans said. And I think it's important to note, because there's a lot of difference between the US interview and the UK interview. An interview for a college in the US is a lot about you as an individual. What are the kinds of things you're passionate about? and generally what you will bring to campus. And it's not just academics, the interview at least. But in the UK, it's the interview is primarily academic in nature. Hans mentioned this; he had an interview with politics and history tutors. In my case, I had an interview for politics and I had an interview for sociology because that's one of the components of the course to which I was applying. And so it is a very academically rigorous interview. One thing I will add is, so there's 5 colleges. If you're applying to either Oxford or Cambridge, the deadline is much earlier. You apply by the 15th of October or the 16th of October, as opposed to sending in the rest of your UCAS applications by, I think it's end Jan. But if you are considering applying to Oxford or Cambridge, the entirety of your application goes in that early. So just keep that in mind if you're looking to apply to either of these colleges. And the other 4, so that you apply to, typically have a different process from Oxford or Cambridge. So Oxbridge is a lot different from the other colleges that you'll apply to. Certain colleges in the UK do not have interviews. Some of them will just go by your personal statement. So it's good to know that it's good to research the specific college that you're applying to in the UK, because a lot of them will have different requirements, different admissions tests, and it's just good to keep on track of that.
Thank you so much again, Zaina. That was again very helpful. So there's a question for you, Hans, in the chat, which I think you kind of already addressed. But before we get to that, very quickly, I just want to flag, this was broadly what colleges are expecting of you in terms of logistical processes. I'm sure there are better sources to find out this information in much more detail, but I think at least you get a very human overview of what these processes are like. So I encourage you all to do your independent research, to look at the schools that you're looking at and finding out exactly what those processes are. However, now that we know what schools are demanding from students of today's generation to get an admission, I think we can finally get to the meat of this call, where we really get to know your journey and how you guys cracked that process. So that's what I'd love to explore. And we can start from Hans, and that kind of addresses the question in chat, which you kind of already touched on. So the question says, there are admission tests like HAT and MAT, if I'm saying that correctly, to apply to Oxford. When did you start preparing, and what was the process of taking the test, which you kind of addressed on? Did you have an interview? And broadly, this is, I think, just generally applicable for most entrance exams that are there, or even staying through school and through extracurriculars. How did you manage to keep yourself motivated through that process in general, Hans?
Yeah, so with regards to preparation for the entrance test, the issue with, so this will be a problem with if you're applying to the UK and for like a more humanities-based subject that requires an entrance examination. The issue is oftentimes it's a very subjective test, right? So for example, the test I gave, the HAT, was literally an essay. And so to be quite honest, I didn't really prepare for the HAT per se. Like there was no like formal preparation structure. What I just did was, a week before my entrance test, I just went online and looked up past papers for the test. And oh wait, am I frozen?
No, Hans, we can hear you clearly. You're
No?
clearly visible
Okay,
and audible.
cool. Yeah, so just about like a week before. Okay, cool. Cool, lovely. Yeah, so about a week before the test, I just went and looked up as many like past papers for the test as I could find, and I looked at those questions and brainstormed how I'd approach that essay. But generally speaking, the way in which I think I was quite helped, and the way in which I was sort of prepared for the process of applying to Oxford in the UK, was just reading a lot of academic reading in the subjects that I wanted to do, that I wound up applying for. So there's really no specific set of things that you can do. So because there's just a wide variety of things that you could do that like ensure that you gain that sort of competency and interest in the subject that you're applying for. So I did a bunch of research work, debate also helped, but just generally the best thing you could just do is familiarize yourself with the subject that you can apply for. Read a lot within that subject. Figure out what your niches of interest are. So for me, for example, in history, I'm really interested in mid-20th century Chinese history, for example, and I was able to find that niche after like 2-3 years of reading, and generally just that. So yeah.
So that seems like, yeah, that's once again, thank you so much. That was a very comprehensive answer, Hans. I just want to check with you. Do you have any process that helps you keep motivated and focused in a preparation like this? Because it's just a lot of volume of reading. And sometimes I'm sure you also might have faced a situation where it was a lot and it was quite overwhelming. So do you have anything that you tell yourself, or is there a process that you follow to de-stress?
So I think I'm speaking for like everyone here when I say that like there were moments where I was very close to despairing during the college apps process. Like I don't know, like so Ayushi Sanjana, like I'm sure you all had your struggles, but like Parth and Zaina, I know like around this time last year, it was not fun. But generally it varies from person to person. So one is just typically knowing that even if things don't go well, it's not the end of the world. And you generally have other options and it's okay because college doesn't like define you. Like I was rejected from like several colleges that I applied to in the US. It's okay. I'm reasonably happy where I'm going now. But like even if I hadn't gotten into Oxford, I would have had other options in life. And specifically what exactly you tell yourself to make things okay will vary from person to person. Some of these can be normal, like, oh, I'll just go to college in India, or like I'll go to college somewhere else, or maybe I'll take a gap year and then reapply. That's fine. And some of these might be a little weirder. So in my case, there were some pretty weird things that I was telling myself that I probably shouldn't, like, that I won't go into now. But just generally, like, just tap into yourself and ask yourself, what would give me comfort in life, and tell yourself that.
That was very wise, and thank you so much. I think that was a very relatable moment for most of the students on the meeting today. Thank you for that, Hans. Just want to check with you, Sanjana. What was your preparation process like, and how did you deal with the struggle of staying motivated and focused?
So, I'll be honest, my preparation process was very chaotic, partly because I had no idea what I was doing and what I wanted to do, most importantly. I think the college preparation process is made significantly easier if you just take some time to sort of sit with yourself, introspect, and ask yourself really what you want out of a college experience and apply it that way, as opposed to picking a school first and then asking yourself, what do I need to get there? Um, I didn't do this, and so like with hindsight, I would say it's easier to sort of figure out what you want and then find a place that fits you rather than finding a school you want and trying to make yourself fit that school. And that's sort of the approach I took for grad admissions, and that sort of helped me there. Um, so that's one. So I knew that I was confused, and I sort of accepted right off the bat that I was confused. So I um, essentially just applied to schools that would let me sit with that confusion as opposed to making me commit to something right away. Luckily for me, the process that was involved for applying was just not a lot, because I wrote KVPY when I was in 11th, because at that time I wanted to go to ISC. So you have to start preparing for the entrance exams quite early. And you write the exam in 11th grade, and I wrote it and it went horribly. And that's when I realized, okay, this kind of college isn't for me. So I dropped that idea. Maybe you should do that, maybe you shouldn't. I don't know. But I realized very quickly that like I wouldn't survive in that sort of a structure where you're expected to sort of commit to something and then continue going very deep into it. I had broader interests and I was happier to just dive into rabbit holes. So I lucked out because I only applied to 3 colleges, and all of them had lighter applications in that Ashoka and Azim Premji, which was the 2 Indian colleges that I applied to, they had very short, straightforward applications that were just 1 or 2 essays and then a basic entrance test that I really didn't prepare for, simply because they test things like your thinking and logic, and I don't see a way to prepare for that. They're also new colleges, so I couldn't even do the thing where I look up previous test papers and sort of see what the questions are like, because that wasn't available to me. I guess you could do that, but I just went in fresh and it was fine. And the same process is what I did for my interview as well. I spoke to 1 or 2 people that had interviewed before, and they said it was a more chill interview where they sort of look at your fit. So I decided to just try. I will say though that I don't think there's a preparation process for colleges that like these. In that I don't think you can be like, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to prepare for college admissions. I think the way you prepare for college admissions is to make the most of your high school experience, because it's the culmination of all 4 years of high school. And similarly, when you apply to graduate school, it's the culmination of 4 years of college or 3 years of college. So in your last year, there's not a lot you can sort of sit down and do aside from just filling out the application form and writing the essay. How did I motivate myself and sort of manage time and stress and everything? I'd say 3 things. First is find a really, really good support system. Like this is really, really underrated, because there will be times, as Hans says, when everything is bleak and you're sort of stressed out. And that time you need a really good support system that you can turn to and that you can vent to and that keeps you going. So find a support system, whether that's a teacher, friends, especially friends who are also going through the college application process. It can be super helpful to sort of just, sit with them and have a giant vent session. The second thing is time management. That's really, really important. I know a lot of people sort of do this thing where in 12th grade, because they're applying to college, they sort of shut themselves off from the world and then stop all of their extracurriculars and focus on board exams. I didn't do that because, frankly, it would drive me insane. So I kept my advice would be to find something that gives you joy and keep doing it without any expectation to be good at it. So when I was in 12th grade, I kept debating. I didn't care if I didn't make it to the sport or if I wasn't winning championships. That didn't matter to me. My debating was just 1 hour where I could, like once a week, 1 hour where I could just have fun and think for the sheer joy of it. So find something like that is just joy and it allows you to step away from that process for a minute. And the third is just stay on top of things. I would make trackers with deadlines, like what was due when, and that allows you to manage your time so you're still living a life while applying to college. And then you can do things that helps you remember that college admissions aren't the be all and the end all. Something that helps me is to talk to people who have been rejected. Um, I know that people tend to sort of just put their successes out there and not their failures. So, in the spirit of that, I applied to 3 colleges. I was rejected by my top choice college. And frankly, having done my undergrad at Ashoka, I feel like everything happens for a reason because I'm much happier at Ashoka than I would have been at that college. And similarly, when I was applying to graduate school, I got rejected from every single program that I applied to except for Oxford. So I think just take comfort in knowing that at the end of the day, there is a fair amount of luck in college admissions. So that is not an indication of your self-worth or your ability or whether or not you'll thrive in that environment. So don't take it personally and be kind to yourself, be gentle to yourself, and remember that it will be okay and reach out to someone who's gone through that rejection to see how great they're doing now.
Thank you so much, Sanjana. That was very wholesome. There is a question for you in chat that I would love for you to address, which is from Ananya asking you, how did you decide that you wanted to do a master's program?
Okay. So I went basically what happened is I realized I loved research. In Ashoka, I got to hold on, am I frozen?
No, you're good.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I realized I loved research. I essentially got a bunch of opportunities to be in the lab at Ashoka, and I realized that being in the lab was where I was happiest. I absolutely love asking questions, and I absolutely love being faced with I don't know as the answer because that means you get to find out. And so I realized I wanted to do research and pursue a research career. In order to pursue a research career, you need either a master's or a PhD program. I didn't get into PhD programs. I got into a master's, which is probably good because the master's sort of lets you explore a little bit before committing. So I have problems with specialization. A PhD is highly specialized, and my undergrad was broad. It was very difficult for me to go from so much breadth to a super specific niche thing that I do my thesis on. Whereas a master's is a smaller degree of specialization. So it allows me to go one step narrower than all of biology, but one step broader than a PhD, which is like the super specific, I don't know, protein or disease that I'd work on. So that's why a master's.
Thank you, Sanjana. That was again very, very real. So I really appreciate that. And also just a note to the audience, Ayushi and Sanjana will have to drop off this meeting shortly. So if you have any specific questions targeted towards Sanjana or Ayushi, please make sure you put that through in chat right now, because otherwise you may not get an opportunity to gain an audience with them later. So just if you have anything, the next 5 minutes is your window. Yeah, so would love to hear from you, Ayushi. And I know that doing really well at CLAD isn't a piece of cake. So if you could just walk us through how you got through that process and how you kept yourself motivated.
Yeah, so the thing about CLAT is unlike like the process that you know, especially very different from like the US UK application. It's really specific to your like ranks that come out. And in India, that's like a very difficult thing to sort of get your head around. And it can be even harder because the thing with flat is there's no specific syllabus as such. So coming from a CBSE background, which is very used to like, is there a lot of background noise? Am
No,
I audible?
you're fine. You're clearly audible.
Yeah. So, like coming from a CBSE background, especially when you're very used to like writing exams with a specific syllabus or at least a limited syllabus where you know what are the things you need to cover and at max what are things that can be asked. CLAT can be something that's very different in that sense because you like how are you going to prepare like English, right? Like they could ask you anything. You don't know what is the kind of vocabulary they'll ask. And when Sanjana does it about luck, right? Like I think that aspect is very huge in CLAT because the difference in like your ranks is majorly based on your GK scores. And that is where the luck part plays in, right? Like maybe you would have read like the GK for the last 6 months, and there was some niche thing that you missed out, which is what got asked in the paper, and you couldn't answer it, but someone else who had happened to just come across it somewhere did. So this is not to say that it's not something that you can't tackle. Like GK this year was very easy. The pattern is changing as well. So the thing with CLAT that my recommendation would be is to be incredibly consistent. So all you need to do it like with your school process, whatever time you take out, you need to make sure that you're consistently practicing the things because it's a very psychological exam in my opinion. Like you need to train your brain in a way that no matter when you take that exam, you can sit for those 2 hours, attempt all the questions and try to maximize your positives because you are negatively marked as well. For every question you get wrong, it's a minus 0.25. So, and ranks differ by like every 0.25 is like 50, 100 ranks that happen. So it really helps to be very consistent with your progress, like your process in general. And something that kept me motivated is so for those of who you like who don't know, I took a drop year as well, and I've given CLAT twice. And my like experience was pretty similar both the years because there's not much you know like there's no set limit to what you need to do, right? So all you need to do is just get down, get working, balance it out with your school. Like you need to know that CLAT is not that work heavy when you get a hang of it. So the moment you know that outside your school work, you need to dedicate some hours to like reading GK or like if math is not your strongest suit, then practicing some math questions. Then like set like 2 3 hours a day to just practice it and then start giving like mock tests where you are like attempting a similar paper as to what CLAT comes, look at previous question papers, and have like a pattern, like things that you want to cover before the exam throughout in a consistent manner. Um, Other than that, like the thing with support systems in CLAT is it matters a lot to have a study group as well. Like I know it's shown as something that's incredibly competitive and needs to like you need to do better than the people who you're competing against, but it really helps to know what your competition gauge would be like because this is at the entire India level. You've probably unless you've given your Olympiads or something, haven't really experienced this as much. So if you can have like a solid group where you know that everyone else is out serious and is probably like getting good scores, then you can sit with them, understand why they're because with logical reasoning, etc., it's very debatable, right? Like there's no right or wrong answer. So when you get an answer wrong, it really helps for someone who has gotten it right to explain it to you from ground level for you to fix your logic and then move forward. So just the best way to go about it is be consistent, but have people who are going through CLAT specifically because people who are going through other competitive exams or especially doing the whole UK US process might not relate to it as much because it's entirely different. Like they might need to do a lot of different things beyond just studying in a way that you don't have to. So make sure you're reaching out to people every time you feel that things are getting hard or you don't understand where you're going wrong. And the only way to improve in CLAT, like for your scores especially, is to like look at your mistakes and fix them so that it doesn't happen again. Other than that, like taking if you don't get a good rank the first year, it's not the end of the world. You have private colleges to apply to. Really, the NLUs just have some sort of brand value, but like even though I'm in my first semester, now that I'm here, I can see that even between the top 5 colleges, it's not that big of a difference. So it really does not matter. And if you feel like you want to give it again, go ahead and do it. Like I don't particularly see any harm. Some people say that it takes like an entire year away from what you could have done to like improve your like fix your CV to maybe apply to an LLM or a master's degree later on, or to maybe start working itself. So it's all of those, but really I don't see the harm unless you have something very fixed against taking a drop year to go ahead and do that, or to apply to private colleges, even like Jindal and Symbiosis are doing well as opposed to what people might generally think about them, like good places to be at in general. I did see some question in chat.
So there was a question in chat asking whether your 12th board exam scores are significant to your admission process in India. So could you just speak to that from a CLAT perspective?
Yeah, so it's not necessary, but you need to have like you need to pass it by at least 40%, so you can't fail your boards. But the threshold is very, very high, very, very low. So don't worry about that at all. Like, if it really comes down to that, you can reprioritize your board exams, but in general, 12th boards are not hard at all. So I wouldn't just recommend dropping it entirely. And for CLAT, you need to like pass it with 40%, I think. Yeah, it doesn't matter as such to the process in general. Like it's just a criteria, you like it's a checkbox you need to tick. Other than that, there's literally nothing else. Like you and your boards happen after CLAT is going to happen in December, so you'll be done with CLAT, you'll have time to focus on boards. Don't worry about that as much.
Perfect. Thank you, Ayushi. I think that was super helpful. I think overall, the idea of a support system being a study group that's going through a similar process is really an excellent idea that I encourage all participants to look into. That was, again, super helpful. I know we're receiving a number of questions in chat. I promise the last 20 to 30 minutes of this call is just going to be your questions. So you can hold on to those until the end, or you can put them in chat. And I'm seeing our alumni are doing an excellent job of addressing your queries when they do crop up. So yeah, just letting you know that we'll have a separate section for that later on as well. So yeah, finally over to Zaina, and then Parth will come to you. And then I just have two last questions from my end, and then we can open the floor to the general audience.
Oh wait, Atul, if
Yeah.
there are no specific questions for me, can I drop out?
Yes, please. Thank you so much, Ayushi, for taking the time out today. And thank you so much, Sanjana, as well, for taking the time out today.
Yeah.
I'm sure that your time spent today has had a significant impact on all our listeners. So really, thank you so much and have a great evening and all the best with what you're up to.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank
Bye.
you.
All the best to everyone.
Yeah, likewise. Good luck.
Okay, perfect. So speaking of competitive processes, Zaina, how did you manage to get yourself together through your application to Harvard, and what kept you motivated?
I think the first thing I'd say is because we were talking about competitive tests before. Obviously, the big one for the US is the SAT. Okay. And I think for a while, the SAT was like a lot of colleges were test optional. And so people were under the perception, like the general perception was that the SAT doesn't matter as much. But for those of you who are now going to be applying, most colleges are now reverting to test required, which is to say that almost every college you're going to be applying to will not let you apply unless and until you have an SAT score on record. I took the SAT, I submitted my SAT score to Harvard as well. I will say it was one of the most stressful times of my life, which is why I talk about the SAT when we talk about the tensions of the application process. And it's simply because to me it was very high stakes. It was that one test that would just round out my academic profile. With the SAT, the thing is you may be doing very well in your academics at school. You may have done like I had done AP Calculus BC, and I had done like a lot of math in general. And I had done a lot of English as well because I did a lot of APs and I was doing a lot of writing. But the SAT is like a different game. It's sort of a test of strategy, and it takes a long time for you to get the strategy for that test right. And I think the only thing I'd say is just have faith. As long as you don't give up on the SAT, it will work for you. I personally took it in one attempt. I did not take it in grade 11. I took my SAT in grade 12. And I think this sort of also answers the question that was just put in chat. I took it in the August of grade 12, which is right before I sent in, well, the same year I sent in my application. So I applied to Harvard early action, and my applications were sent in by end October. So I was pretty late in taking my SAT. I think Hans had taken his much earlier. I don't know when Parth took his. I think he took the SAT. But in general, when you take the SAT is not as important as what you're scoring on the SAT, right? If you think in grade 11 that you want to give it a try to get a general feel for the test before you take the second attempt, go for it. Like it's a pretty preferred approach. People like to super score their test, which is to say you take 2 attempts and then you take the best of both. Because a lot of colleges in the US allow you to submit separate scores for the English section and separate for the math. However, I wanted to wait as long as I could so that I would know that I'd score well. And it sort of just depends on your level of preparation. Whether you take it in 11th or 12th doesn't matter as long as you're prepared. You can get a good score in one attempt in grade 11 if you're prepared. So don't worry about being too late. That's for sure. Don't think you're too late in taking the test. That's one thing that I can say for sure. And I think just like keeping yourself sane throughout the whole process. I think the way I did that was just by having things I genuinely enjoyed. I think Sanjana talked about it earlier. Having certain activities that you go back to that just really bring you a lot of joy. You do them for fun. Debate was one of those things for me. Just debating as much as I could was a nice sort of break from all the stress of the applications. Actually, as soon as, like, I think the last week before I submitted my application to Harvard, I was actually in a debate. So I had gone to the Chakrabarti debate at noon the week before I submitted my application, and it was just like a nice short break from the stress of the application before I finally went back and submitted it. So I think just make sure you have something or the other, some passion of yours that keeps you sane throughout the process.
Thank you so much, Zaina. And Parth, I know you've been waiting for a while for the conversation to cycle back to you, so you can finally give us your thoughts.
I think most of my thoughts have been wrapped up by a lot of the other alumni, but I agree with Sanjana to a huge degree. First, find the college that's right for you, and then work towards, getting there. So don't think like, okay, this college is best for me just because it's whatever college, and then work towards it. Find if it's actually a good fit for you, if it fits your interest, if it's what you want to do, and like what you want to get out of a college experience, and then work towards it. So I think once you have that in mind, it's pretty clear then, like, once like you have a goal in your head, then you sort of want to work for it. That, and then also just surrounding yourself with a great bunch of people, good friends. Well, I had a sibling, so I mean, like I could sort of vent my feelings to my siblings at times when, it was getting stressful or it was getting hectic. So find yourself a good group of people who you can reach out to when that burnout period is sort of almost approaching. They'll help you like come back from it, and they'll keep you on your track that you're supposed to be on.
Thank you very much. So that I think is really insightful. So another question regarding applications that we've gotten over a large sample size is regarding extracurriculars. So I know obviously you guys were involved with debating, and I'm sure you guys must have had other things that you were doing. So, and I'm sure you have other friends at university now who have had many other extracurriculars. So we've received questions in chat, not only in chat, but in our forms as well, asking for what kinds of extracurriculars might help them. So if you guys could just take a minute and share, how did you guys represent debating to boost your profile if you did that? And B, if not debating, what other extracurriculars did you pursue that helped your profile, or have others that you know of pursue to help your profile in this process? So Parth, if you could share your thoughts, and then we can go to Zaina and then Hans.
Right. So, in terms of extracurriculars, I did a bunch of other things, and these were like in completely different random fields. So, for example, one of my other extracurriculars was I did this space design competition that's like hosted by NASA. It's called ISSDC, in case any of you guys are interested. But yeah, I did that because my school was sending a team. I signed up, and I ended up like doing it for like 4 years of like all 4 years of my high school. I ended up becoming my school's captain for that, my school team captain. So it started off as something I just applied to, but then by the end of the 4 years, it's like something that grew into a passion. And as someone that's applying to like economics, space design doesn't really, it doesn't really, there's no connection, but it was something I was really passionate in. So again, it was just more of a matter of finding extracurriculars that I was passionate in, did that throughout high school, grew, developed skills from it. And then I basically put those skills that I developed and that I grew, like that I made from doing those sort of things onto my application. And I think a huge reason for why my success was shown is because I showed that sort of learning experience I had from like doing that competition, but like I also did a lot of things related to my major as well. So, for example, there was this person's work I had been reading on economic development in rural Indian cities or rural Indian towns. So I just cold mailed that professor and I said, I'm really interested in your work. Can we get to like, can I, is there any way I can work with you? And she ended up replying, and actually we like sort of worked together. I helped her with her research, and like so I also found like passions that I was interested about, reached out, made those connections, made those opportunities for myself, and sort of developed my skills like that.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Zaina?
Okay, so I'll just answer the question on extracurriculars first, and then there's a couple of questions in chat that I can just answer out loud. I'm on an iPad, so it's a little difficult for me to type the answers out. Okay, so I think the first is for extracurriculars. I think I did a lot of things, but the thing is, I started with them really early on, like grade 9 or before, because at that time I wasn't thinking about applications. And so just the way in which a lot of my activities unfolded or like came out, it just came out of genuine passion. And I think that's the biggest thing I'd say for your extracurriculars. Please don't choose an activity because you think it will look good on an application, because it only looks good on an application if there's genuine passion behind it. If you, for instance, are I don't know, playing football because you think it's going to look good, colleges will think you're such a competitive athlete, don't do it for that reason. If you genuinely enjoy football, then do it, but don't feel the need to do it. Similarly, for debate as well, I'd say, don't do debate because you've seen so many kids do it and that it gets us into colleges. Do debate because you genuinely find joy in it. And why I say that is because admission officers are really trained, they're experienced, they can distinguish between a student who's doing what they're doing because they care about it, and somebody who's just doing it to sort of come up with an application that the student thinks is what the admission officer wants to hear. So, and how do they get to know that? You may think that, well, admission officers can't really see, like, read into your mind, right? That's where your essays come in. You will never be able to write a genuinely good essay if it's not coming from a place of passion. It's not something that you've genuinely poured your heart and soul into. It's also your interview. The interview is really that place where they can sense the sort of interest you have for all of the things you're doing. So I think that's the major thing I'd say on extracurriculars. And why I see that is because it really depends from person to person. I was involved with a lot of different things. I was doing writing for my editorial board in school. I founded a lot of publications in school. I was doing a lot of advocacy in a lot of different areas. But really, when you like hear us talk about our extracurriculars, don't think of it as a model of what you should do. Just think of it as one of the representations of, like, just, I don't think I'd say source of inspiration, but just like a reference point for like how we sort of engaged in certain activities that we were passionate about. And don't emulate those activities. Find activities that you enjoy, and regardless of what it is. Like Parth mentioned, doing a competition that was not related to his major per se, but I'm sure insofar as your interest in that field, even if not the field, but your interest in exploring new things is evident. It really doesn't matter what that particular activity is. I think I'll really quickly then answer 2 questions that came up. I got a question about APs. So I did a lot of APs. I did 11 APs. I started early on in high school. So I started APs grade 9. I did 3 APs in grade 9, 3 in grade 10, 3 in grade 11. And then I did another 2 APs after I got in as well in grade 12. And the way in which I went about choosing AP subjects, which is what the question was about, it was just, this is going to sound really repetitive, but it was just subjects that I enjoyed, to be very honest. I did a vast variety of APs. I explored everything from world history and US history and European history to calculus BC and biology. So, which will, because if you just hear like my list of APs, it's not going to come to like one particular major. And that's primarily because when I was taking APs, I wasn't thinking about what I'm applying for. I was just thinking about what it is that I'm genuinely curious in. Things like I'm doing maths in school, but I want to learn a little bit more than what I'm learning. And APs provided me the way to do that. I think APs are especially good if you are doing CBSE. I started APs when I was doing a CBSE curriculum in 9th and 10th. And So the kind of history that I was studying in what we call SST was really not the sort of history that I wanted to be studying. It was very restrictive. I was not doing the kind of writing I wanted to in CBSE, and APs just helped me explore a whole new world through things like writing actual argumentative essays in history that CBSE never allowed me to. So just when you pick APs, pick ones that you're interested in. Don't think about what you're planning on applying for, because that may change. By the time you apply, you may not even be interested in the same thing you were when you chose the APs. So don't think about the concentration or the major you're looking at. Just choose APs because um, just choose by, I guess, your interest in the subject. And this is going really long. But one last thing is, I think there was a question about AP scores. So honestly, it depends from college to college. Certain colleges give you credit for AP, certain colleges do not. In those instances, you should go to the college's website and just check what is the acceptable score for getting a credit in a particular AP subject at that college. But generally, as well, APs are a great way of showing academic vigor. You should be aiming for a 4 or a 5 on an AP. Obviously, aim for a 5. It's fine if you don't get it, because honestly, it's not so much the score as it is how you present it on your application. I had 5s on almost all of my APs except one. Like, it was a 4. But for me, like, it wasn't really something I had to explain, because it was on an AP that did not relate to what I was applying for, but also because it's generally more authentic, because it's not human for you to score 100% on everything you're doing. So don't worry if you're not getting a 5 on every single AP. Try your best, but it's completely okay if you don't.
Thank you, Zaina. That was again very elaborate and detailed, and I'm sure was very helpful in addressing some concerns. There's another question that keeps cropping up, and I'm sure you can speak to this, and I think Parth can also speak to this about social volunteering and having a social impact as a part of making your application stand out. And I'm sure Hans also has some things to say about this. But yeah, just want to pick your brains on whether you had anything like that in your profile when you're putting that together. How did you do that? And yeah, there's a question about where you get the opportunity to do that. So yeah, if you could just speak to that as well, Zaina, then we can go to Hans and then hand back to Parth.
Definitely. So I think when it comes to having the social service impact, the community service aspect of your application, don't go actively searching for opportunities that specifically are like volunteering at a hospital or volunteering at an NGO. I think instead, just sort of in the things that you're doing existingly, just try and find the social service aspect in that, which sounds abstract. But for instance, I'd say, so even if I was doing debate, right? Debate in itself is an extracurricular, but I was also involved with teaching debate to a lot of students. And there you go. That's the social service aspect of an activity you enjoy. And you just use that activity and made it into social service. So, and this can apply to so many different things. If you're passionate about science, you could be tutoring, but there's like so many examples. And I don't think you need to necessarily go and volunteer. Don't think that there's any added value to saying that you volunteered someplace as opposed to doing it at your own little level. It's very contextual. Colleges just want to see the impact you're making, and the sort of impact you're making doesn't depend on sort of the place at which you're making that impact, if that makes sense. I think one of the best ways to get started with social service is at your school. There's a lot of opportunities, like at least at my school, there we had so many different ways in which, as a part of our school curriculum, we'd be engaging in things like community service projects every year. And so that's a great place to start if your school has that. But even if not, just with the things that you're doing currently, with your current extracurriculars, just try and start building on it now, especially if you're in grade 9. You definitely don't need to start with an activity particularly because it's going to look good because you're giving back to your community. So just sort of take things with the flow, I guess, as and when you get opportunities, but don't try and force it, because the thing with community service is you don't want to come across as patronizing or condescending. And that's very important, because a lot of students, when they talk about community service on their applications, talk about it in a way that sounds like, I did this for these many impoverished children, I gave these many meals to them. And that's a territory you don't want to go into, because even if you've done good for a lot of people, when you talk about it in that way, you sort of just take away all the good you've done. Colleges want to see people who want to give back to their communities, because their communities have done so much for them, not because you think giving back to these people makes you a better person, right? You don't want to present it in that way. So I think broadly that.
Yeah, that was really helpful. Thank you so much, Zaina. Yeah, Hans, again, to speak overall, and if there's anything specific about the social impact stuff that you'd like to chat about.
So just like the extra, so I guess I'll just talk a little bit about like how the extracurricular stuff is useful for the UK admissions process. To be clear, did I do some social impact things in high school? Yes, but they ended up not really mattering to my application to the UK system. So like, for example, I volunteered at a cancer charity, but that's because like there was some personal things in my family that made me want to volunteer at a cancer charity. So like what Zaina said, if you're going to do social impact things, do things that you genuinely care about, not because they are social impact things, right? And in any case, like it didn't end up going on my application to Oxford. But in terms of the kinds of extracurriculars that would help get you into like colleges in the UK, again, like it's really, really specific to what you want to do and how exactly you're envisioning your application. So again, like the caveat here is just don't do things because you think they'll get you in, but just do things that, like for the US, you want to do things that show personality or show why you're a good fit for colleges, etc. For the UK, just do things that you're genuinely interested in. So try to find out more about the subject that you're going to end up applying for. So for example, in my case for history and politics, I wrote a couple of research papers. I had an oral history project, etc., etc. Like just things that I just like sort of like just having fun with my subject, history, reading more, doing things, trying to figure out how I could sort of get into like studying the subject more seriously in high school itself and just learn more and more and more and more. And just so picking extracurriculars that show that commitment really helps with applying to UK colleges. I'm just going to like quickly answer this one question that's been floating around for a while now. Like that was like really up, which was about, I think the interview process within the UK and academic texts. So, I mean, the way in which the interview process works is just the interviewers will ask you questions that are subject-based and that are designed to catch you off guard. So in my history interview, I had two interviewers, one an expert in medieval history, which I had no idea about, and one professor of modern history, which was along the lines of what like I'm interested in. The professor of medieval history opens, she's like, read this text. The text is about pig farming in Europe in the Dark Ages. I have no idea what the text is about. And she's like, analyze this for me, please. And so that's the kinds of questions you're going to be asked. Similarly, my politics interview, I had one professor who did like political philosophy. He was like, how can you conceive of the concept of a perfect state? Do you think such a philosophical model may have shortcomings? And so there's generally just two things to keep in mind when approaching the interview. The first is just don't panic because you will be asked things that you don't know about. But two, this is where debate actually does help with your application because it helps you think logically. So approach it less as I should already know the answers to these questions, but more like, how can I go down starting to think logically towards the steps to answering these questions and how might that be useful? And like to answer the question on like whether or not an academic text is necessary. So doing research in high school is often a good way to show that you have interest in that subject area. It is not compulsory though. So I did a reasonable amount of research in high school. I got into Oxford. I have classmates at Oxford who didn't do research in high school. But for certain degrees, you will be required to submit an academic essay. So for history, like I had to submit a graded history paper that I'd written for school. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a research text. It can just be any essay. But like, yeah.
Okay, I know Zaina, you want to jump in, but before that, very quickly, everybody, I just want to introduce to you Rohan, who has joined us in from UPenn. So Rohan, could you just quickly introduce yourself, where you're currently at, where you went to school in India, and what board your school was, and then we can give back to Zaina. And then Rohan, if you have thoughts that you'd like to share on what extracurriculars you had, how debate played a role in that, would love to hear from you. After this, I promise, guys, there's a flood of questions that are coming in. We're just going to open it out to general questions and answers. So yeah, Rohan, for your introduction, then back to Zaina, and then back to you, Rohan.
Sure. Hi, everyone. What's up? My name is Rohan Seelam Sethi. I was on Team India WSTC the last few years. I'm currently at Penn studying economics, potentially going to add on a biochemistry or a computer science major. Still undecided yet. So if you have any questions or thoughts on that, feel free to ask me. In India, I went to school in a place called Chirag in Hyderabad. I did IBDP for 11th and 12th, and I did IGCSE prior to that. If you guys have any questions about studying econ, applying early decision, applying to colleges in the US, feel free to give me a shout.
Perfect. So we have our economics expert, Rohan, ready to answer all of your queries, just pulling his leg. But yeah, handing over back to you, Zaina, and then Rohan. Yeah.
So I was just really quickly going to add to the point about the interview. So Oxbridge interviews, they're infamous for being very tricky. Uh, they are specifically designed to test your thinking in times of, you might call it crisis, right? They want to ask you things you do not know to see how it is that you will respond to questions you have no idea about. And that's primarily because even if, so everybody knows the interview is very academic. And even for my interview, I had to do sort of pre-reading. They gave me this text on anthropology that I had to read before my interview. Even if I was not applying for anthropology, I was applying for political science, but there was a section of my degree that would have focused on anthropology. And so one of my interviews was strictly anthropology, a field I knew nothing about. But that being said, even if it was an academic interview, they aren't looking to test your knowledge. They will never ask you questions that test specifically your knowledge in particular concepts. What they're looking for rather is your ability to learn. They often call it teachability. So they're testing how teachable you will be as a student. So even if you don't know something right now, how, like, the purpose of the interview is to gauge what kind of a student you will be when you come here, so that even if you don't know something right now, how easy will it be for them to teach you? How curious you are as an individual. So yes, the interview in the UK is very technical, it's very academic, and almost everybody who goes through the interview has a story like what Hans and or me have just said, being asked questions we knew nothing about. And I think everybody comes out of that interview thinking, I'm not going to get in, or I just completely blew that interview. Almost everybody you're going to talk to who has done an Oxford interview will say that, but often that's the sign. If you think you did not do well, if you think that you did not know something, you're typically good, right? Because they only push you to think further. They push you to your limits if they know you have that potential in you to sort of answer those sorts of questions. So going into such interviews, just keep that in mind. There are a couple of questions, I guess, but I'll get to those, I think, once we open it up to general questions.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Rohan, any thoughts about extracurriculars and how debating played a role in that?
Sure. So I think debating is probably one of the most important extracurriculars that I had going into college. And I think there's a few reasons this is true. One is colleges, especially in the US, that have a tradition of encouraging the liberal arts, really love getting people who come in with this ability to have structured and critical thinking with knowledge across a broad array of disciplines, right? But past that, I think the reason it's really, really useful to debate is because you can also do things like link it to other extracurriculars as well as your essays. I know Zaina talked about linking it to your ECs. I think in terms of linking it to your debate, to your essay, one thing that I did is I had a very big emphasis on the fact that I was a debater. So I was talking about even as I was doing social service or as I was doing other extracurriculars, how that forced me to sort of challenge my beliefs, how I had to apply frameworks that I learned in debating to critically evaluate what I was doing, that sort of stuff.
Thank you, Rohan. And I just want to check with you, and this was something the other alumni was speaking to. Besides debating, what other extracurriculars do you see your peers at your university having backgrounds in, or maybe your friends having backgrounds in that have helped contribute to their profile?
Sure. I think the number one thing is just be very good at throwing balls very fast, be an athlete. But given you guys are on a debate call, I don't think you guys have that skill set. So I think a few important things are one, research, because a lot of kids here do have backgrounds in research. It's something that's encouraged at big research universities, be it the Ivy League or Oxbridge. So I think if you have the opportunity to set yourself up for research, even just doing an independent lit review sort of thing by yourself without a research mentor, I think that could both be incredibly personally rewarding, but also really good from a college apps perspective. The second is, I'm sure this has come up already, just like volunteering and social work. As Zaina said earlier, don't do it on a small patronizing sort of scale, or where you just say, I went, I distributed food, and hence I'm your savior. Rather, I think there's two big ways of in which you can sort of create impact. One is do things that are novel, do things that sort of not everybody else is doing. I know kids in my school were working on really, really interesting projects in terms of decarbonizing neighborhoods, for instance. I know Zaina did something regarding like cleaning up rivers. But past that, I think the other way you can actually have social impact is through working with some big organizations, but do so on a level that actually matters. So work on strategy, write research papers for them, ensure that they're like better able to raise funds, that sort of stuff. And the third is link it back to the ECs that you really, really like. So my big love and my big passion throughout high school was debating. What a couple of school friends and I did from back in the day is we ran a debate tournament together, and all the funds that we raised from that tournament, we donated to charity. We ensured that a lot of motions that were set in that tournament included education on concepts such as philanthropy and effective altruism, so that we were simultaneously debating and doing what we liked. So it didn't feel like as much work, but also having a positive impact at the same time. If you like baking, for instance, and that's one of your ECs, try and do a program where you're teaching women in rural and underdeveloped regions how to bake, such that they're starting their own small and medium-sized industry, such that you sort of have microcredit platforms running, that sort of stuff. So whatever you like doing, think of how to scale that and really do good for the world with things that you like doing.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rohan. That was again very insightful. And thanks all of you alumni for sharing your experiences to the level of depth that you guys have shared. I'm now going to open the audience to please put in all questions you may have. If you have not answered questions that you previously asked, just copy paste and bump that up so we can see it. I know there's been this other question that we haven't yet addressed. So there's this question going around saying, do you guys know of any scholarships that your colleges offer or any financial aid programs that they offer? So if you guys could quickly go through that, if you guys are beneficiaries of that program, detailing that, or if you know anyone who's a beneficiary, how they're availing that benefit would be, I think, insightful for some of our listeners. So if anyone wants to go first, please feel free to unmute. Yes, please, Hans.
Yep. So the thing with Oxford is there's broadly three big scholarships that I think Indian applicants could avail for at Oxford. The first is there's the Oxford and Cambridge Society of India that themselves give out an annual scholarship. This isn't a very large scholarship. I think it's worth about a couple lakh rupees, but it will cover, like, say, I think your accommodation for an entire year, for example. So it's always good to say, if you can't get like a very big scholarship to cover the entirety of your tuition fees, it's a good idea to stack several smaller scholarships. The second scholarship that Oxford offers is this thing called RISE. So that's RISE, which is basically a scholarship that they give to like kids from developing countries who want to, on two conditions. A, that they wish to like apply for a program in something policy related. So PPE, or that's politics, philosophy and economics, history and politics, or something like that. But B, that like they wish to go back to their home countries after their degree and just generally like work there. So that's like a really big scholarship that covers the entirety of tuition. The third scholarship is this thing called the Ellison Institute Scholarship, where there's this institution called the Ellison Institute of Technology at Oxford. And basically what the kinds of students that scholarship is meant for is students who are working in basically like at the confluence of like STEM fields and policy fields. So things like biomedicine, things like medicine, things like public policy as well, and so on and so forth. Just basically like a scholarship for people who like want to do policy change in the world, essentially. Now, unfortunately for me, I actually didn't qualify for any of these scholarships. The reason is rather sad. I'm not actually an Indian citizen. So the passport privilege kind of inverted there. But yeah, there are definitely scholarships available for Indian students if you want to look for them.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure beyond this also, there are a number of scholarships and financial aid programs that, once again, we may not be the best people to answer you on. So I really encourage you guys to do your independent research when it comes to this. But yeah, thank you so much, Hans, for, I think, what's the right direction to look for there. So I'm just going to look through chat. So there's a question saying, do you need a career counselor for college applications? So I'm curious to know, amongst the pool of us four on the call, how many of you guys made your applications with the support of a career counselor? What role did they play? And how many didn't have them? And how were you able to manage this? So yeah, Hans, I see you shaking your hand. So would you just describe what your experience was like managing your application independently?
Basically, it's really funny, right? Because I didn't have a career counselor, and my school basically had like one counselor who was really, really overworked, because we had one counselor for like all 60 kids in my grade who were all applying to university at the same time. So it was just, it was very much a case of doing research on my own and then asking people who had done the college process before me, both my seniors at school, but really importantly, seniors from the debate team and from Team India who I knew, who are now at college in the US or the UK, who could help me out. So this is again like a place where like debate's really, really useful because you get to meet people, you get to network with people. And so just generally like getting the opinions of multiple people who knew what they were doing because they had done the process before me was really, really helpful while I was applying myself. And it helped me get through fine without a college counselor. Like, to be clear, a college counselor can be really helpful. And I'm sure like there are other people on this call who will talk about it. But generally speaking, if like affordability is an issue, if you just like don't know where to find one or like things like that, you don't need one as long as you have like a reasonable idea of where you're going to get your information from. And like, as you can see, I turned out okay. So yeah.
Thank you, Hans. I just have a curious follow-up question. What was a part of your application process that you struggled with the most that you would have appreciated some external support on so that, you know, some of the listeners can know how bad it could get potentially, that maybe they could make the choice to get someone to support them on?
Okay, so fascinatingly enough, my I actually don't think my UK applications process was particularly like very like soul-crushingly difficult. I think this was because I was applying to the US and the UK. And so with the UK, I was just applying to like 2 colleges. With the US, I was applying to 6. And so like I was writing a lot more essays for the US courses, and that like was very draining. I think what would have helped there, I think, was just in terms of when you have many essays to write, and when you have things like an activity section and an achievement section to fill out on the Common App, and when you have like separate financial aid forms to fill out as an international applicant, over there, having someone, one person, a counselor, to guide you through like different aspects of the process and review all the material that you're writing, I think would have been quite helpful in terms of guidance. Because like the way it ended up happening for me is I just ended up like spamming a bunch of my debates and just being like, read my essays, please. And so, you know, yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, next, Zaina, if you'd like to share your thoughts on this counselor question.
I just wanted to really quickly jump in with a couple of the questions that were asked, mainly because I need to rush in like 5 minutes. I have a 10:30 class and I am in Lamont Library, which is a bit of a walk, from where my classes are. And so I will have to start working on that. But really quickly, I think on the point about career counseling, I think my school had an excellent career counseling program. And I think I availed that sort of counseling. They were like, my school was so intricately involved with every one of my essays, right from grade 9, even helping me with activities. So I think debate, for instance, it was my school that made it possible for me to debate. In a city like Amritsar, it was unheard of. Like debate just did not exist, but it was my school that connected me with ISTS. And I think if your school does have counseling, they are the best possible resource, simply because they know you to the extent that a counselor will not, because ultimately you will get guidance from like say external counselors, but it's your school that helps you implement it largely. Stuff like leadership positions, any initiatives you want to run in school, getting recommendations. So really your school is the best possible resource, but this will vary depending on what all your school offers. The other question that came up a lot is why I applied early to Harvard and why I chose Harvard over a lot of the other colleges I was accepted to. I think for early action, I would say it was a decision very unlike one that I would have typically made. For those who know me, I'm a very indecisive person. I like to push my decisions off to other people. I heavily rely on my parents or my siblings to help me make decisions. But for some reason, I think this is where fit comes in. It was just intuition, honestly. I just felt like Harvard had been my dream college forever. I had always had that in mind. And so when I wanted to apply early, because early is that one college, right? Harvard has restrictive early action, which means you cannot apply to other private colleges early as well. And so for me, it was sort of like, this is my top choice if I get in. And well, if I don't get in, just thinking about it from like a mental health well-being sort of perspective, if I have to get rejected by a college, it might as well be Harvard, was what my reasoning essentially was. Why I chose Harvard over a lot of others. So I was honestly very, very fortunate. I got into a lot of great colleges. I got into Yale. I was Penn World Scholar when I was accepted to Penn. I got into the University of Cambridge. And while I'm so grateful for those colleges, I think ultimately Harvard was just, I think everybody sort of has that one college that's been their dream for as long as you can imagine. Some of the reasons for Harvard specifically over like the UK are things like the liberal arts education that studying in the UK would not have offered me. Somebody had specifically asked about Cambridge. I got into Cambridge for HSPS, which is Human, Social, and Political Sciences. It was an unconditional offer, so I did not have any conditions I needed to fulfill for it. But if I had chosen to go to Cambridge, I would not be able to study medicine, which is a track that I am now considering. I'm planning on being pre-med. As for the other, choosing from the other US colleges I got into, I just think in the sort of opportunities that Harvard's departments in government, for instance, can offer me, a lot of the other colleges I got into did not match up to that, which although I'm so grateful to have gotten into those colleges, I think Harvard just provides me with everything I need for my majors and much more. There was one last question I think I will address. Okay, I think just like a little fact on financial aid. Financial aid and scholarship in the US is not all merit based. Hans mentioned a couple of scholarships in the UK, but for the US, like Harvard specifically only gives need-based aid, which means that regardless of how great a student you are, you may have gotten in, but whether or not you get financial aid or a scholarship depends entirely on your need, which is to say, Harvard has certain conditions, like if your family's income is below 75,000 US dollars per annum, you qualify for that. But it can be a little tricky. Financial aid is a process I'm not fully qualified to comment on. There's a lot of complexities like assets, a lot of different things that go into it. But please be aware that it's not necessarily need-based, but at some colleges it's strictly merit-based as well. So it's good to keep in mind if you want to apply for financial aid, just sort of know what the financial aid policy of your particular college is. Harvard in particular is known to be very generous with financial aid. I believe about half of the class of 2028 comes on some sort of a scholarship. I know a lot of students from India in the past couple of years who are here on 100% scholarships. I know a lot of students from Pakistan who are here on 100% scholarship. Like I think they call it 120% scholarship. So 100% for the expenses of tuition and everything, and then 20% extra for enabling you to sort of make those external expenses that you would need to be able to attend that college. And last, I think there was something about APs, which was, I think somebody said they've taken some particular APs in grade 9 and whether colleges would give them credit for that. I highly recommend searching up just like the name of the college and that AP credit policy. It'll really help you to sort of get an understanding of what are the sorts of APs you get credit for. However, so just so you know, credit basically means that you have to, that you fulfill a certain requirement towards your degree. So you now do not have to be in college as long. So say you get like 4 credits through APs, you probably don't have to do like a last semester in college and you can graduate early. But Harvard does not offer that. So you do not get to like graduate in lesser time. You do get to skip introductory courses, I think, which is what Parth said as well. For instance, in my case, I had done AP Calculus BC. And so we have something that we call the math placement test before we come into college. And I was able to place into higher math courses because I had done that. For me specifically, AP Calculus BC also fulfills my pre-med requirement for math. And so I sort of just don't need to do an additional course for the math requirement to all the colleges that I intend on applying for medicine. That was really long, but I think I covered a lot. I will have to jump now to begin my walk to class.
Yes.
But
thank you so much, Zaina,
once for having me. Absolutely delighted to have been here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zaina. I hope you get your Monday cracking. I wish you the best at your class today and have a great week ahead. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye. Have a great day. Okay, yes, Parth, you've got your hand up for a while. So yeah, if you'd like to share something, please go ahead.
I just have one more point to add about like financial aid scholarships. So there are schools, I'm going to introduce a term here. There are colleges called need blind colleges in the US. And essentially what that means is that if you apply for financial aid at a lot of US universities, sometimes applying for aid, especially if you're not a citizen of the United States, it reduces your chances, because they have to usually give priority to US domestic students in terms of who they give their funding to. But there are a handful of colleges in the US that are need blind. So Harvard is one, Yale is one, Princeton is one. And I think starting from this application season, Brown is also now becoming need blind for international students. So what that means is essentially, even if you apply for aid, they are not going to look at it as a factor to weigh down your application. So, and like Rohan said, Dartmouth's also need blind. So these are like really good universities that show that like even if you're applying for financial aid, they will not weigh you down just because you need a scholarship. So you can definitely look into these universities if you're interested in that. And then as far as merit scholarships go, there are a lot of great merit scholarships at a lot of great US universities that exist. I'm just going to throw out a few. For example, there's the Robertson Scholarship, which gives you a full ride at either Duke or the University of North Carolina. These are very good institutions. Then there's, I think, a Vanderbilt Cornelius full ride scholarship. There's an Emory full ride scholarship as well. These are all merit-based scholarships. So you apply based on merit, you write essays for them, and then there's like a specific committee that selects you. So just make sure to like look into these colleges that also like offer you merit-based scholarships. Some of them have those programs within their universities as well, and they're a great way to like just like get another chance at like a full ride to college.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think that was again very well detailed. Very happy that you mentioned some specific for some of our students to look into. So I know we're at the almost at the end of the meeting since it's about 7:45 in India. Yeah, sorry, Rohan, please go ahead.
Sorry, just the last thing is adding on to the pretty comprehensive list that Parth has given you. College admissions is a process that genuinely does have a lot of information about it online, just if you know where to look. I think a few big recommendations there are one, join subreddits such as applying to college. There's honestly just a massive wealth of information there in terms of one, access to private counselors that are just offering their services up for free and really do want to help people. Second is alumni who've been through the process and really want to give back purely because they've gotten a lot from there. In terms of online resources, there is also a lot of fluff and a lot of misinformation. So you really do need to learn how to cut through that. But I think good sources to look for past applying to college are one, look at like, I think it's called college admissions results or something, which is also a subreddit. I think you can find a lot of profiles of people who've successfully gotten in there. And you can sort of see how yours map onto those profiles, sort of see how you can tweak it so that yours is better, you're writing better activity descriptions. Third is resources like, I think it's called the College Essay Guys. I think they have pretty good
Yeah, the
guides
college
in
essay
terms of
guide.
how to navigate the college admissions process specifically for the US. I think there's also people like Admitium who are pretty good resources. So definitely check all of those out.
That was again super helpful. Thank you so much, Rohan. Hans, do you have anything to add to that or any comments to make?
I mean, see, look, here's the thing for Reddit, right? The thing for like the UK stuff is like I was an R/slash sixth form, and it can be useful, but like the caveat here is and like this is what Selim didn't say, but like the caveat here is just that like you will like the subreddits basically just generally turn into like a one giant mental health meltdown closer to like when the admissions come out. So just like the caveat here is like you will maybe see things online that will make you freak out, but it's okay. Just like remember to filter according to your own requirements. So, yeah.
Perfect.
Right. The debate has been postponed. Second.
Okay, sorry about that. There was someone who I don't think they meant to have their microphone active. Anyway, final question from me, just to close out this meeting is, and I think this is a bit of a fun one, is what is something that you're realizing at university that you wish you had known when you were applying, just so that our future applicants in the call can be informed when they finally make an application and get into a university? Yeah, anyone wants to volunteer to go first, please feel free. If you want to take a second to think about it, also do that while I scroll through chat to see if there are questions. From the audience, if there are any questions that are pending that you'd like to hear about, please put that through. There was a previous message asking for the email addresses of the alumni. I'm really sorry. As per our child protection policy, ultimately you are minors and these are all 18 plus alumni. So we won't be able to give you a direct channel to them. However, I do assure you that if you write to us, we will get that through to them and get a response from them and send that over to you. There might be a bit of a turnaround time for this, but we will definitely do our best to help you out in your journey. So please do send through your queries over email. Yeah, Rohan, please go ahead. You're on mute.
My bad, sorry. Just answering your question from like a hindsight 2020 perspective. I definitely think going into the college admissions process, given everything that you hear on the internet in terms of people like solving cancer and curing world hunger before you get into college, you're really, really scared and intimidated going into the college admissions process. which I think is completely valid because some of the people here truly are superstars and you sort of have to be intimidated by them. But I think retrospectively, Indian applicants have really, really strong profiles relative to the rest of the application pool. And just the things you do, even as a part of your school curriculum, or just do by virtue of the culture that's here in India, is really, really impressive. So I would say have more confidence in yourself when you are navigating the college admissions process. Really just don't be as scared. And worst case, even if it doesn't work out, know that you are really, really impressive. Even if you've just attended an ISDS tournament or two and you know a little bit about debating, that is still a lot more than most people from other parts of the world do. So I think just have confidence going into the process, know that it will likely work out, and even if it doesn't, you're still really, really good for it. I think there was also a question regarding applying early decision or early action, and how do you get the courage to do it? So I actually ended up applying early decision to Penn. I think applying early decision, if you know you really, really want to go to a college, is the single best move that you can make. Sorry, a bit of a freshman flu. The reason it's such a good decision is because sorry,
You can take a
early
minute. That's
applicants,
completely fine.
yeah, early applicants get a massive advantage from a point of view of admissions because at the point at which you really demonstrate that you are really, really committed to whatever this college is, they're on margin more likely to take you. I know this is more true of places like U Chicago or Northeastern than it is true of some other schools. But I think you just have to do the specific research in terms of which colleges have massive ED boosts. And if you really do like any of them, just go for it. I think applying early decision is a very wise decision.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rohan. Yeah, Hans and Parth, any advice for your former selves who were undertaking the college admissions process, or anything that you would have wished you had known, or any new learning that you're getting at university that you'd wish you had known? Would love to hear from you. There's nothing specific, that's completely all right. But if anything comes to mind, please do share. See, Hans, you have unmuted. So yeah, I think you have something to say here.
I mean, in hindsight, there are a lot of things I would have done differently because, like, who wouldn't? But, like, generally speaking, it's just one, just oftentimes so there's two things in hindsight, right? The first is oftentimes the hardest step to starting your process is just getting started with like activities and doing research because it seems so intimidating, right? It doesn't matter. It's okay. Like you're scared, everyone else is just as scared as you. And the fact that like you're looking for information probably puts you ahead of a lot of other people, right? So it doesn't matter. It's okay. It's just the first thing that I would have said in hindsight to myself because I think just the crippling amount of anxiety that I had with starting the process with very little external support ended up being a bit of a handicap. Second is once you get into college, regardless of where you've gotten into college, like literally everything else stops mattering. So you need to remember that you might attach a great degree of like your own self-worth to the kinds of things you are doing right now in high school, be it academics or debate or other extracurriculars that you might do because you're passionate, because you're doing them to get to college, whatever. The moment you get into college, it stops mattering. So even if your college application hasn't gone the way you expected it to or the way you wanted it to, once you end up somewhere, it's basically like a fresh start on the next step of your life, right? And I'm saying this as someone who's like, yes, is like going to a very good college, and I really can't talk. But like, I'm also saying this as someone who's been rejected from a lot of other good colleges that I would have been very happy to go to. And there's someone who's like some of my major extracurricular things that I was very passionate about in high school ended up not working out the way I wanted them to. So the point is, regardless of like how exactly your high school experience was, your application process was, it's okay. Once you're in, it's just a fresh start. And that's the most important thing about going to college.
Thank you, Hans. And once again, that was super encouraging. So finally, Parth, if you have anything to add, please feel free.
Okay, I'm not gonna give as serious. I'm not gonna be that serious. I'm gonna end it off on like sort of a light note. But I think the thing about college admissions process is that you need to, yes, take it seriously, but then at the same time not take it seriously as well. Like in the sense where it's not supposed to be this competitive rat race. It's not supposed to be like you're consistently one-upping your classmates, your peers, or like you're seeing what this other person is doing and you need to do better than them or you need to do better than that person. It's literally not about that. It's about where you were, what 4 years before, how you are today, how you've improved, and how you can reflect that on your college application. And then if you do reflect it well enough, the college admissions officers see that, and then it usually works out for you in your benefit.
Thank you so much, Parth. I think that was very realistic as well and very helpful. So final say from Rohan, and then I think we're about at the end of the call. Yes, please, Rohan.
Sure. Just adding on to the reassurance that Parth has given you, I think I have two big pieces of advice. One is pick a college that you know you're really going to be comfortable at. Don't just apply to like Princeton or UChicago because you've heard these are good schools, just to go there and find out that the academic culture is too rigorous or too competitive or too cutthroat and that you don't gel with it. You really do have to be a very specific kind of person to thrive at specific schools. So pick the kind of schools that you have a good cultural fit with. If you're somebody who really likes an emphasis on the liberal arts, don't come to Penn. If you're somebody who wants to have a very pre-professional focus, where you're really ambitious from a finance or consulting or tech point of view, then maybe Penn is the sort of school for you. I think it really depends on what you want out of life and really picking the schools for that. On that note, I think liberal arts colleges are very, very good schools that end up being overlooked. So definitely do look into colleges like Williams or Amherst. If you want a more sort of laid back vibe, you really do want to engage with the liberal arts critically. The second is the college admissions process, as much as it is about me picking the kind of school that I want to go to, is also about schools picking the kind of people that they want attending their school. So what that means is that the school that you end up at is probably the right school for you. Because if Brown is selecting for a lot of really laid back, really friendly, but also ambitious people, then that's good. Because if you're that sort of person and all your classmates are also that sort of person, you end up getting along with them really well. So wherever you end up at college, don't end up being like too bummed about it. Be really happy knowing that that probably is the right place for you.
Thank you so much, Rohan. That was very warm and encouraging. And on that note, thank you all so much for spending your 2 hours roughly with us. I hope that was insightful for you. And I'm just going to stop the recording.